So what we have to do is really set a goal of like $19 an hour by 2020.
Welcome, everyone. This is Right Mike. You can find me at Debate Right Mike on the Twitter, also on MySpace. And
MySpace, and I'm Left Mike. You can find
Yeah.
me on the Twitter machine at Debate Left Mike, and of course, wherever you're watching us, thank you. Hit that subscribe button. We should be on all major platforms by now. We absolutely appreciate your support. And with that said, a tasty beverage there. Y'all ready for this?
It's a lemonade. It's lemonade Mio. Mio, the little Mio, like you squirt in your water. There's no calories.
I think I have like powdered Propel, and ice going hard tonight. So I think we're gonna get into it today, Mr. Right Mike. I think today's gonna be a little bit messy.
No, you just believe in bad economic policies because you have a good heart.
Yeah. Is that why? Is that why it is?
Yeah. Well, today we're going to be talking about minimum wage, particularly minimum wage laws passed by the government. So, Mike, what are your thoughts? You're pretty passionate about minimum wage.
I am absolutely passionate about minimum wage. So I'm a big fan of the fight for 15. I even think that's low. I think that good minimum wage laws are the fastest way to reduce the size of government, because if profitable corporations pay all of their employees' labor bill and not a part of it, and leave the other part left up to the taxpayers, that will shrink government welfare spending pretty tremendously very quickly. So I am a big fan of minimum wage. I think the data supports it, and I think all opposition comes from the industry of corporations that are doing everything to maximize their profits and will absolutely lie as much as they can to keep wages down. Mike, tell me I'm right.
No, Right Mike will tell you that you are wrong. You're coming from it, I think, from a good place where you just want people that are not making very much money to make more money, and then you see it as they will then be not on the government dole as much, so it's a win-win, so you think I'm stupid for arguing against it. Fair?
I do. It's fair. Right. Yep.
My big issue is that minimum wage laws, when you establish a minimum wage, that's a form of price fixing. They are at their core antithetical to my belief in individual liberty, because if I'm willing to do a job for X dollars an hour and this company says, okay, I'll pay you that, or vice versa, the company says, I'm willing to have this job for X dollars an hour, and you come in and say, yeah, I'll do that job for X dollars an hour, I don't understand how the third party, the government, gets to step in and go, no, you can't do that, you got to pay him at least 15, and then the employer goes, well, I can't afford to pay him 15, so I guess I can't hire you then. That, to me, is crazy. I realize I say insane a lot, so I had to throw crazy in there.
Would you like me to tell you why that's not crazy? And why, just on a very base level, that your entire philosophy and
Sure.
reasoning skills are completely flawed?
Sure.
You ready for this?
Treat me.
So, when is the last time the U.S. unemployment rate was at 0%? Do you remember?
No, I wasn't alive ever when it was at 0%. I don't know.
It's never been.
Probably never been at 0%.
Correct. It's never been at 0%. So what that means is you always have unemployment, and while you always have unemployment, you will always be able to find someone that is willing to do an entry-level job for less, because then they will have that job and not the person that's already employed. So if the minimum wage is abolished, someone that making $7 an hour to be a grocery cashier, for example, someone comes in and says, I'll do it for $6 an hour. That person is now unemployed. $6 is in, but that person can come back and say, well, I'll do it for $5.50, and you've immediately created a race to the bottom. You have to have a floor when it comes to wages, because you never have unemployment reaching zero. So without it, you always end up with a race to the bottom. It's basic economics. You're dead wrong.
No,
on this one.
that's an amazing, because I don't think you've ever made that argument. We've talked about minimum wage in the past. I don't think you ever have, and I'm really shocked that you did, and I'm almost embarrassed for you.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Do you make minimum wage, Mike?
I do not make minimum wage.
Why not?
Because I am in
the government has not mandated that you have to make more than that. Why don't you make it?
Because I have a set of skills that are deemed valuable by the free market.
Right. Do you know what
Right.
percentage of the U.S. population makes minimum wage?
I don't. If I
Take a
had to
wild
guess, I would say
guess.
it's about 20%, 15%.
3%.
What?
3% or less.
Say three, like
Three.
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 3% make how many
Minimum
how many
wage.
of them are within
I
like
couldn't tell you
within
$10 an hour.
150, yeah,
That would be a fair. That'd
150%.
be a good number. I'm not sure how many make less than $10 an hour. But my point is
Okay.
that everybody that's making more than that now is making more than that not because of a law that stops the government from letting employers pay them less. It's because they have in a way bid up their own wages, or they have created a value. Their value in the marketplace is what they can get paid. If I left my salaried position, I could find another comparable salary position. It's because there is a demand for my labor that pays X amount of dollars per year
But
for
you're a
my
skilled
skills and
worker.
abilities.
Yeah, you're a skilled
Was
worker.
I born
It's
a
different.
skilled worker? Of course not. So
No.
if you establish a minimum wage and you stop somebody from getting into the market at that first rung on the ladder, whatever that may be, and it's going to differ for different people with different skill sets in different industries. If you stop somebody from getting that first rung on the ladder, they're not going to learn those valuable skills that you learn in the
But
workplace.
the minimum wage, so you're arguing that the implementation of a minimum wage is going to prevent someone from entirely entering the workforce?
Yes.
Where? Where, when, and why?
Okay, so let's look at the biggest impact that minimum wage laws had initially are on the black community. So if you go back to the 1930s, blacks had a lower unemployment than whites in the United States. This is not a time that we were less racist or less bigoted or anything like that. We were a much more racist place. So it's not like we had some laws in place forcing employers to hire more black people to make sure black people were not unemployed. It wasn't the government doing it, it was the free market doing it. But then all of a sudden we established minimum wage laws in 1938, and then black unemployment by the 1950s. So within 20 years, black unemployment was more than double that of whites. It went from lower to more than double
Right.
thanks to
But
minimum wage laws. So you effectively priced. That's how the unemployment went up. Is you priced people out of the market, so they couldn't get those initial job skills.
do
So
you
even for the exact same job, if as an employer, I'm not going to do a race to the bottom, because if I want to hire somebody to operate a cash register, I'm not just going to see who will do this for the absolute cheapest possible. I'm going to see value in each individual candidate. That's the free market. Someone else can come up to me and say, "I'll do it for $5," and someone else says, "I'll do it, but I really want $6.50. However, I'm excellent at math. I'm really really friendly. I love people." They might just go, "You know what? Actually, let's pay $6.50 for this guy."
All right, so I have two counterpoints to you. The first on is the black argument and how it made it worse for black people. Do you consider people that are slaves to be employed?
Slaves?
Slaves. If someone is working but for free, is that considered employment?
If it's voluntary, I guess.
Okay.
But not if
All
they're
right.
slaves. If
So
it's
if someone is making $1 a day, right? If someone is making $1 a day because they can go no other place for compensation, they on their chart and your data, they would be employed, and now the minimum wage has made them unemployed. But the minimum wage has now made it so all jobs have to offer that minimum, so that person can now go get a job at a higher wage. So yes,
no, if their labor wasn't worth that, it's going to be very hard for them to get a job. The idea that the businesses are just going to pay more money is where it really breaks down. So it would definitely, I agree, it would be a really good thing if wages went up for low wage workers. I think that would be a good thing. Income inequality, and I'm one of the few people on the right that I hear say this, is a bad thing. Too much of it. Now, income equality is a bad thing too. That's why I'm not a socialist. But income inequality, when it gets extreme, can also be a bad thing.
I'm not for equality either, but go ahead.
So I get it. They make more money flows back into the economy. The demand for goods and services rises. There's more GDP. These are all
wonderful.
good. These are all good things. But it's backed by the somewhat utopian idea that we can just mandate higher wages and it's not going to decrease employment levels. And that's why I brought up the example of blacks in the 1930s, where their unemployment was lower and their unemployment starts going up because you start pricing them out of the market. If they could just turn around and go get jobs that paid higher, then their unemployment rates wouldn't have gone up in the first place.
Why is black unemployment now lower than it was then, as the minimum wage has continued to rise?
It's not lower than it was in the 1930s.
When they implemented the minimum wage, you said it went up to like 20%.
Black unemployment is still almost double that of whites today.
No, but since it, right, regardless,
So it's the
missed
same
point.
problem. We
I'm
never
not saying
fixed the problem. We created it and never fixed it.
I.
And
So
it's not a color thing, FYI. We're
I don't.
talking about it
No, no.
predominantly affects lower
Yeah.
income
I know
communities.
you're not coming at this from a color
Right.
standpoint.
It
You're
affects lower income folks, and that does disproportionately affect the black
in fact,
community.
right. So here's the other point that I have, and I'm gonna come back to the data there in a second. But there should be a social contract that if an employer is willing to take a third of your life, 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, that you should be able to afford a basic existence. You should be able to have shelter, food, transportation to and from that job. For a corporation to make the kind of profits that they do and still leave people in poverty is abysmal. One step further, to leave them so far in poverty, like the case of Walmart, that those employees are now being given government assistance, which they then spend at Walmart, is a perverse reverse socialism that's absolutely disgusting. And I don't know why any free market capitalist stands for it. Why should I be paying through my tax dollars the employees at Walmart's food bill? That's insane.
I think this is like almost like the chicken or the egg kind of thing, where you're looking at it like you're thinking what I view as the result comes first. So you're thinking the food stamps are as a result of Walmart's low wages, and I think there's not enough pressure on Walmart's wages. There's not enough, the demand for those jobs is not high enough because people have all these government benefits. If you didn't have all these government benefits where there's people that don't have to work at all, maybe the demand for the jobs increases.
But
Maybe,
if the demand for the jobs increases, then the wage would decrease.
we're talking about minimum wage, the idea that the only reason everyone doesn't make minimum wage is not because the government has never forced my company to pay my salary. Like I negotiate my salary for my skills. So if you subsidize people to not have to work as hard or to not have to go out and get a job, you're allowing Walmart to pay them less, basically.
Back to your example of having like if you have three people and one of them, yeah, they want 6.50 an hour, but they're more friendly, blah 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 blah. But what happens when you have three or four people that are all equally qualified for the job, equally attractive for that position? You create a race to the bottom. You create a how low can I get that position for? That's like the economic reason that minimum wage was put in. Why did we implement minimum wage to begin with?
Maybe we were too tired of black people having great jobs.
So many. We implemented minimum wage because so many people were barely getting by or not getting by at all, while corporations were starting to build higher and higher profits.
Yeah,
right?
1938, those rich corporations.
The New Deal. The New Deal. I mean,
it wasn't about rich corporations.
They were still going. It was landmark legislation, and I think it was one of the most successful that we've had.
The shitty
and I
deal.
think that
the New Deal. You like the New Deal?
Absolutely.
Oh dear God.
I think that had it kept up to the minimum wage, had it kept up to what it was then, it would be like 22 an hour. And now the problem we have is that sounds crazy because we've let it drift so far from where it is. But
the market can decide for itself.
Go on.
You hate
so
that
we're taking people's money to give it to them for food stamps. Like you have no problem.
I'm not a fan of that. No, I want to get rid of that too. So that's not an argument. Yeah, because the argument is that people are starving, which is why they're obese and on food stamps. It makes sense.
Fair point.
Go shopping at Walmart on the first of the month and try to buy Doritos. It's cleaned out. Go try to buy Sam's Choice Cola or RC Cola or whatever. Cleaned out. Shelves are empty. You go over to the fruits and veggies section and everything's rotting away. Yeah, they haven't sold an apple in days.
I think you're being ignorant. Move on with your point.
So think about countries, third world countries. China everything was made in China. China is kind of up and coming. You're seeing a lot of that manufacturing move into other countries. So you're seeing manufacturing move into countries that are even poorer. So they're kind of, and China's industrializing.
Yeah, that's why I'm for tariffs.
Okay, that's a different conversation. But think about minimum wage. If they instituted a minimum wage law where they could never build all those factories where all those kids are sewing shoes and stuff, if they had a minimum wage law that prevented that from happening, they never would be able to rise up out of poverty.
Child laborers are better off.
The people working in the factories are better off earning that 30 cents a day or whatever, because then they can actually eat.
Okay, but
So
what happens when
look
you're
at in
earning
the U.S. If we have
what
no
happens
minimum wage and
when
you
you're
have the
earning
ability to
no,
climb
right
up.
now, shut up. You're earning $7 an hour working full time and you can't eat. And now the government has to give you food.
The government doesn't have to give you food. The only argument for food stamps is starving people, and when they're starving, show them to me. You're going to show me a bunch of people that are morbidly obese
Oh
and
my
are
God, you're
eating
so ignorant. I have
eating
no idea.
steak and
All
lobster.
right,
Not every day, but on the
I
first of
got a
the
point
month.
to hit you with. Would you wrap up what you were saying so I can swing at your little head.
Oh, okay. So think about all the important basic job skills that you learn. If you go out to get a job, you learn things like being a member of a team, showing up on time, effective communication, dressing professionally, customer service skills, dealing with people you don't like, having managers that you
Which you'll
don't
all
like,
do at
how not to
$15 an
drive into a
hour.
guardrail after your last table was a 12 top and they stayed an hour past closing, then tipped you $0.
Right.
So all those things are important things for you to learn. But if the government prices you out of the market so you can't get that first job, you're not going to be able to learn those skills, and then you're perpetually on the
So
dole.
so your argument is by raising the minimum wage, especially when we do it sharply, that it's going to cause higher unemployment and thus less people in the workforce, and thus have an economic benefit that's a net
Well,
negative.
that would depend on how you measure unemployment, for example. So if your full time, if your hours go down, you may actually have increased employment, but there's more part time jobs because it saves the company on benefits and things. So it's not a fair metric to look at unemployment.
Okay, well let's do this. Let's look at some real data because this isn't all theoretical, right? We've had places that are playing with minimum wage. This isn't happening in a vacuum, so we can go look at a study. One of my favorites
Seattle,
is Seattle. I love
yeah,
Seattle. So
Seattle that
Seattle,
already had wages that were well above the minimum, and
they
they
did.
raised it
Yeah,
a tiny bit.
they didn't raise a tiny bit.
Yeah, they didn't raise it all the way to 15. If you read how the law was implemented, by the way.
they're getting there. They're getting there. It's in stages. But
And there's exceptions for all the arguments against it, like you're pricing small businesses out of the market. They give exceptions for that and everything. So it's kind of silly to
well,
use that as an argument for
I
raising the
agree.
minimum
I agree with
wage.
the small business exception and the tipped employees. I'm on the fence on, but that's fine for now.
But your
But
argument for minimum wage is not, it's not corporations, big corporations should pay more because it's not logically consistent for you to argue that it's only big corporations that should pay more when your argument is that that person deserves X amount of dollars as a minimum for working in this country.
No, I think it should come in the form of a subsidy, right? I think a small business should be subsidized to be able to compete with the more efficient corporations. So they
Yeah,
pay the
that's
employee
interfere
12,
with the free market there.
and the
It's a great
government
idea.
pays with 3. Well,
So
yeah.
what was your
price
point on
is fine.
Seattle? What do you think's so great
Uh,
about Seattle?
so Seattle, they raised the minimum wage, and like I said, we're getting up to 15. But I think it started at 9, went to 11, then 13, but we're approaching 15 now. And I don't know if you know this, Mike, but the restaurant business in Seattle, which conservatives told us doom and gloom, is booming.
Okay.
That the restaurant's booming, discretionary spending is up, the economy is doing very, very well. The minimum wage increases. None of the scary thing happened, and it's working. The minimum wage is working in Seattle.
Minimum wage is working on Seattle because it's funny. The Wash Post article that I know I sent you before that I read that
Uh-huh.
showed that low wage workers were worse off. So if the low wage workers are worse off, isn't exactly the people that you intended to help in the first place?
I did, and I did you read the article or did you just read the headline?
No, I read the whole article.
Okay, so that study there was actually a University of Washington study, and when it came out, it kind of shook progressives, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it was gloom and doom. It wasn't good. After you dig into that, what you
I
find
did.
is that the University of Washington study excluded employers that have more than one location, which happens to cover about 40% of Washington businesses or Seattle businesses. Once you and
They
there's been
excluded
studies,
chains.
right?
Was the argument?
Right, and which are a lot of minimum wage
So
workers, and it, like I said, covers 40% of Seattle workers. Once you put them back in, this narrative of we had to cut hours or we had to lay someone off that does happen with individual small family-run businesses when
oh.
you raise minimum wage.
Take it away from the little guys and give them to the chains.
That does happen there.
Seems like a
To
great
large
idea.
degree. But by and large, when you include all businesses, it still has been a net benefit positive to that economy. People have more money. The economy, there's more discretionary spending. That creates jobs in itself. So the study that you throw to debunk the claim that Seattle is seeing negative effects, yeah, that's true. Because it was funded by conservatives to find flaws, and to do it, they excluded 40% of employers. The Seattle minimum wage is working.
it's better for chains and it's worse for smaller businesses, and smaller businesses
That's
are the ones
not
that got more exemption.
that's
It's
not at all what I argued.
Yes, it is, because if those smaller businesses are losing money, but overall there's more revenue, where is it going?
No, the smaller businesses are
Or
not
there's
losing money. The smaller businesses had to adapt, and part of
They
that
didn't adapt.
adapting. No, part of the smaller businesses had to adapt, and which means either
So
cutting
how are
hours
their
or
employees?
getting more efficient. But their employee may have gone out. Maybe they lost an employee, and that employee went out
Is that
somewhere
not?
else and
Does
got
that
a better
not look
job.
like that might be the beginning of a trend to where there's people moving from? Maybe the reason for this is there's people going from those small businesses to the big businesses,
No,
which is going to slowly cannibalize those smaller businesses as they can't afford to pay rising wages.
no, I
And
don't
then the
think so at all
employee has
because
less of an incentive to want to work for that employer because they pay a lower wage in the first place to try and be competitive, unless they
you
have
know,
some deep passion for working for that smaller company.
yeah, there are going to be growing pains, especially when you have a relatively big jump. But what you're also going to see is those small businesses that can't immediately afford the higher wages are going to benefit from the local economy that it's really picking up, and very likely going to be able to hire someone back at that higher wage. So none of the scary things that the conservatives say are going to happen with a high minimum wage have happened. And like Australia has a high minimum wage, things are mostly fine. Canada has a high minimum wage, things are mostly fine. Inflation, it'll uptick it a little bit, but you're not going to charge $9 for a Big Mac, right? Those are all just fallacies. Seattle's a great example of, is it perfect? No, but does it work?
You're,
Yes.
and this is another weird thing about when you look at data in Seattle. You're looking at an industry that you're talking about restaurants and stuff, and where the average wages. It's not like it was $7 an hour before. So the
No, it was
average
about 11.
wages
It
were
was about 11.
the average wages didn't really go up that much, and they were already increasing in the first place on their own. So
But
you
that's fine.
put a minimum wage that's just barely over what people are making, and then call it a big success when people make a little bit more.
No.
I don't really
So
think that's that valid.
but no, you cannot go from 7.50 an hour to $15 an hour overnight. The economic shock that would have would be devastating, right? And it's not that the minimum wage should not be 15. It's just that we've let it slip so far. So what we have to do is really set a goal of like $19 an hour by 2020.
Can you see
Get
how
it there, and tie it to a
when
CPI.
you're barely changing it right now, how it's not going to have some devastating effect on employment? When you're barely changing it off what the market's already paying, but you're talking about something that's way higher than what the market's paying. Even if you try to step there $1 an hour at a time, you're going to, with every dollar, price a very small number of people out of the market who will then not be able to
No,
get
but
entry
that's
level
not what
jobs.
happened in Seattle. So you said that's what happened
Seattle's
in
wages
Seattle.
barely changed. Their wages barely changed.
But they did, and they still didn't price
They're
people
still
out of
not
the
at
market.
$15 an hour. They have priced people out of the market.
But not enough to make it so. Like the benefit is that
They're
the
also not
jobs
looking at
available.
benefits. So if you hire, let's say you fire one full-time person, and then
Right,
you create two part-time positions.
right,
In the eyes of the data from the left, you have no net change. Or
right.
even worse, let's say you fired two full-time people and you hired three part-time people. In their eyes, you've just gained a job. So it's not
So
honest to believe.
you would absolutely need studies to
Right.
show me that
You
that's
can see
actually
that
what's
you can
happening.
see that completely that it's
You can make
not
that argument. I don't think
fair.
it's true, but you can make that argument that that could be what's happening. But until you have proof or sources of it, I'd buy into it zero.
I can show you more Seattle data. That's fine. But
So,
it's just, to me, to disregard a fundamental law of economics that when you force the price on something to go up, the demand for it's going to go down. If you force the price of labor up, the demand for labor does not remain constant. It will go down.
but I agree that that's true in an economic premise. But businesses are already operating as efficiently as they can. Right, they're already doing if they could find a way to not pay someone 7.85 an hour to tomorrow, they would not pay them 7.85.
See, that's a
If
fundamental. I mean, if my company could find a way to not pay me my salary tomorrow, then they would not pay me that. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's not what we actually observe in the real world. We see people's wages go up. We don't see them being forced down because the business can get away with
haven't
it.
they haven't gone up, and part of the reason they haven't gone up
Wages
is
haven't
because
gone up.
the floor hasn't moved. When the floor hasn't moved, the rest of the wages aren't going to move with it because again, there's so many people at that point where there's someone willing to work for $1 less at almost every skill point or every skill set.
Well,
Pretty contentious and a little bit all over the place,
okay.
but
Yeah, that's fine. So my basic idea, my stance on minimum wage overall is that minimum wage laws are going to make it harder for people who need a job the most to get one. When we look at big historical changes like implementing the minimum wage law and the negative effects that it had, I just can't support a law that's going to have that kind of a devastating effect on people that need the money the most. People at the very bottom of the scale are the ones that need to be able to go out and get a job at whatever price the market is willing to pay. If you're willing to work for a job, I don't understand how for a certain wage. I don't understand the government stepping in between you and that job.
It's not willing, it's forced. So right now, if we abolish the minimum wage, what do you think would be the fair wage for a Walmart cashier? I think it would go down to probably $5 an hour.
Don't know.
So how the hell?
No
does
idea.
That
I doubt it because it's more than minimum wage right now, so that logic doesn't hold.
You what?
It's more than minimum wage right now, and if that was true, there would be.
That's just because
my whole point is, if your whole idea about driving wages down, that's how things work, and we need the minimum to stop it from happening, there wouldn't be less than 3% of the population actually making minimum wage. There'd be all kinds of people making minimum wage because the businesses would just drive their wages down to that point.
That 3% number, I think, is garbage. I'm going to research and see how many people are making like less than $11 an hour.
That's not the same as making minimum wage. If the argument is that the market's going to drive wages down, it will drive them down to the minimum. That's the whole argument for the minimum wage.
No, because
so
you're
if that's
still
true, you'd have more people making minimum wage.
You're still going to keep good people making incremental raises, right? So you'll still give someone an extra 50 cents every year to keep them around.
Why would you be giving them raises when you can pay them less and less?
They're already trained at what they can do. There is some value in retaining a good employee, but when the floor is very low, everyone is going to stay near the floor. It's proximity to the minimum wage.
Everyone's not staying very near the floor.
They absolutely. I'm going to research numbers on that, and I'll tell you what. Check out the website leftmic.rightmic.com. I'm going to write an article on minimum wage. So my concluding remarks, and I'll let you have the last word because you're an idiot and you need it. I will quote a very funny man, Mr. Bill Maher, and I think was a spot-on interpretation of this topic there. Quote, do you want smaller government with less handouts, or do you want a low minimum wage? Because you cannot have both. If Colonel Sanders isn't going to pay the lady behind the counter enough to live on, then Uncle Sam has to. And I, for one, am getting a little tired helping highly profitable companies pay their workers. Raise the wage. There's no reason the Waltons should make $1 billion a year each while I pay for their employees' food stamps. That's absolutely fucking perverse and ridiculous, and it's not capitalism. Yeah,
but essentially, I don't believe that the government, a third party, should be able to determine what your labor is worth, either at a minimum or at a maximum. It's the exact same argument the other way around. If they can set a minimum for your wages, why can't they set a maximum for your wages? I don't believe the government has a right to determine what our labor is worth.
That's dumb. The maximum argument is dumb.
No, it's not.
No
it's
one's ever. No, it's not the same logic.
Yes, it is.
We will be right back with a little bit more before we send you off for
our
next week.
Final segment.
Check us out online, guys.
No, we'll do more segments.
leftmic.rightmic.com, all the major platforms. Make sure you subscribe to us. We appreciate it, and we'll be right back.
Yeah.
And fan brews. Who you got this week? Who you got this time?
This week, I'm going to have to go with Lauren Southern because I watched her documentary, Farmlands. It was really good. It's about the genocide in South Africa. And I've watched her. Yeah, I've followed her for a little while. She's a journalist, and she does some really good content. I really like her perspective on things. She's really well-spoken, conservative. She's pretty awesome. So I'm going to go with Lauren Southern. I'd buy her a beer or an apple teeny or whatever she drinks.
Apple teeny, whatever.
Soda water.
Good stuff. I'm gonna go with a guy who's inspired me. I've been following him for about 3 years now. Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk, entrepreneur, and almost single-handedly turning me into a New York Jets fan. He hopes to one day to own the Jets, and he's doing everything in his power to make it happen, which I think is dope as shit. But yeah, I think the guy's fascinating. The guy works his ass off. He's just, the American dream personified. I got a ton of respect for him, and I think it would be cool to have that beer or cocktail or whatever it is, and pick his brain for 20 minutes. So
you're a fan of a guy that works hard. That's a pretty big shock.
Yeah, capitalism is an amazing thing. I think he's a legit dude. So,
and I'm a fan of a pretty blonde conservative journalist. Now you can act surprised.
Yeah, shocked, absolutely shocked. All right, guys, That's going to do it for this week. Catch us next time. Subscribe, hit that subscribe button, support us. Thanks. We appreciate it, and we'll see you.
See you next week.